Did you see that I sat down with Jamie Walsh in here the other day?
I did.
Did you get a chance to listen to that yet?
I saw some clips.
So he's a legislator, and he is looking into this data center stuff from a legislative point of view. And there's a lot of things that like he doesn't understand or know, not because he's dumb, but it's a lot of information to take in. So I thought this morning it would be good to get like your perspective on the tech stuff, on like what these things are, what goes into them, and what they mean for like the end user who uses them and how do they get made. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain a little bit like who you are and kind of like what you do?
Yeah.
For those who don't know, the Amazing Bailey.
Yeah. So I live in Scranton. I kind of tell people that I am a technologist, that I pretty much live on the bleeding edge of technology. So that exists in many different forms, everything from more physical IT and like traditional rack and stack jobs to actual like software work, a lot of automation, a lot of consulting, building of apps. And it kind of spans across a lot of different things, not just that, but the main industries that I generally focus on right now are probably like real estate, construction, government, finance, but there's a little bit of everything in there. Like the thing that drives me and keeps me excited in the morning is like being on the bleeding edge of technology. So a lot of new work, a lot of new clients all the time, and new opportunities.
Can you kind of, if you want, you can have some of that water. Can you kind of tell me like your origin story? Like from like, how did you get into this? Because it seems like a really interesting.
Yeah. I'm lucky in that I grew up in a family owned, my dad owned a marketing agency. He still does. And I grew up, I think my dad would babysit me all the time, and I grew up pretty much in that office all the time. He started it the year I was born. Spent a lot of time in there, and luckily over the years, just being around all the technology, the equipment, the cameras, the computers, everything you could possibly think of. I think that was a good playground or like sandbox environment as a kid. And I was lucky enough to kind of realize that I was into technology and computers at like a very young age, which I think is a tremendous gift. I think being able to find what you love and like be able to do that as a career is a very important thing. And some people don't find that until they're a lot older. So
yeah, which sucks.
Yeah. So I think it was a very lucky situation in that regard. Really started like many summers working with my dad, like as an intern, learning a lot of things, what I did like to do, what I didn't like to do, all sorts of different client situations. And I really enjoyed it. After a couple of those types of summers, I was a big, like, I love my dad, but I don't want to work with him kind of guy.
That happens a lot.
Ironically, we ended up working with each other. When I was in high school, I was like my senior year of high school, I was working on a startup. It was kind of like an Uber Eats competitor. We won like the business planning competition. It was exciting and mighty for where we were at the time. I was working with a kid from the University of Scranton who was a couple years older than me. And we really thought we were going somewhere. Long story short, we didn't really realize that's like a logistics business. That's not even really a tech company.
Right.
And so when I kind of saw the writing on the wall, I knew in like not really an arrogant way, but almost like just a naive way, or being honest with myself. I knew that I didn't really want to go to college because I was a terrible student. I love to learn. I love school. But I didn't really like the way in which the system kind of fed it to me, and the way in which that just like everybody has to follow kind of the same path. And I felt like that just wasn't really the exact path that I wanted to go on. Obviously, the older I get, the more I realize like generalized education is important to a degree. And I would love to go back and take a lot of those classes now, to be honest.
Yeah, it's weird how you feel that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to go back and like take chemistry again, or so many of those. But at the time, I was just like a terrible student. I was focused on sports and just like being a kid who didn't want to follow rules, and that was cool at the time. So yeah, that was kind of like I knew I didn't want to go to school because it would be a waste. I was doing some freelance work, some Google Ads type stuff, marketing type stuff. And I would be like on calls with clients and stuff. And my mom would like come down in the basement behind me. And I just felt like, I don't know, it's time. I need an office.
Like on a video call?
Yeah. And I was like...
She's bringing the hamper down.
Yes. And I was like always, for, the first 25 years of my life, I feel like I was always trying to be older than I really was.
Right.
And I don't know, that would just like kill me. And I one time I called my dad and I was like, I'd love to rent office space from you or something and be in an office. Like I want more of an office environment. When I was over there, I had no intention of working with him, but then I was talking to one of the guys that worked there at the time and he was like, so what exactly do you do? And I was telling him I was doing a lot of the Google Ads at the time, and a lot of the agencies were kind of using the bigger media companies to do that work. It was like the Wild West at the time. They didn't really know exactly what they were buying because they were used to selling.
Is this like 2016, 2017?
Yeah, 2015. They were, this was still like old wall media days, kind of like the end or the beginning of the new era. Digital was becoming very popular, but these guys were used to TV and billboards and radio and just all the traditional things. So digital was very new for them. It ended up being like a good fit where they had a lot of accounts, and one day he was like, you should look at what we're doing because I think we're maybe getting ripped off. So I took a look at it. They were, so it was like a good fit. And it made sense at the time. Like it was an awesome experience. I always tell people like working with my dad was like the best and the worst thing all wrapped in one. He would probably say the same thing. Like
I used to work with my dad too, and yeah. I totally understand what you're saying.
Yeah, you get some perks that you would never get in any other type of job, but then you also get some things that come with that
stressors that you shouldn't need. Yeah,
and it got to the point where there would be days where I felt like I had to pick between like if I wanted, like I worked up to being a partner with my dad. I really cared about the business. I loved working with him. But at the same time, it was like a struggle because we both wanted the same things, but we had very different principles and ideas of like how to get there. Yeah. And I think like I was kind of young and hungry and crazy, and he was like older and more relaxed and kind of like, well, I've been doing it this way forever, like who's this crazy kid coming in trying to change everything? And there would be days where I just felt like I had to pick, like, do I want him as my business partner or my dad? Because we'd be like at work and there'd be serious things, and then we'd have like a family party later, and it was really hard for me to like decompartmentalize
separate the two. Yeah,
and it like bleeds into everything. But since I didn't go to college, I was always like self-conscious, like that I would never find a job, that like when you put me in the job market and you compare me to a lot of the other people, especially in technology, like the resumes are insane. People go to crazy schools. They've got really long lists of things that they could brag about. And I just didn't have that. And I felt very self-conscious about it for a long time. Got really lucky, I guess, in a weird way, right place, right time, where I started to do a lot of web work through the agency. We were doing a lot of digital ads. Digital ads send traffic to a place. Most of the time that ends up in a conversation with the client, like, you need to improve your website because the traffic's not converting, or we want to get it to convert better at like a higher rate.
Right.
So a lot of it bled into web work. We had also like a lot of old clients with websites and stuff that needed to be managed and redeveloped and redesigned. And I really did enjoy that. I fell in love with a platform at the time called Webflow. I became like very well known in the Webflow community, like around the world. And that led to like that's how I got Amazon Web Services as a client. That led to like a lot of very interesting connections that, like, I guess from a perspective point of view, really helped me realize like there's a bigger world out there, I guess.
Sure.
And I still live here in Scranton. I didn't say like F Scranton, I got to get out of here.
You can curse on here if you want to.
I'm still here and I love it, but I feel like I do have an international, like I talk to people all over the world, and that's like a cool thing about being in technology that not every career has. So yeah, that kind of was like a very interesting journey. Webflow, this and that, I was tweeting all over the place, and randomly somebody reached out to me who was the co-founder of a tax software startup, and they were looking for somebody to basically maintain all their web properties. And he found my stuff online and he was like, we want you to join full time. And I couldn't believe it. And funny enough, it was like one of those situations where I think a lot of people looking outside in would be like, oh, I would love to work at like a new, hot, trendy startup.
Yeah.
And coming from where I was at with my dad, where we were like doing everything all the time, going from that to like a venture-backed startup, I felt like it was going to be like this crazy change where like everything's going to be organized and everything's going to be like under control somehow.
Right.
And
little
that,
did you know.
Yeah. And that like, if they were telling me I was going to do this one thing, I would do that one thing. And that was a crazy concept to me. Like, oh, you're just going to worry about this one thing.
Right.
That was obviously not the case. Like I learned that lesson pretty quickly. And I also learned a lot in that experience, like the cost of people and how people are kind of like the hardest business of all businesses. In every business, you know, people are always like the problem.
Yeah.
People are very complex, and you can't always like solve problems by scaling people. When I joined TaxFile, that's the name of the company, I was probably like the 40th employee. And when I left, there were over 100 employees.
Wow.
And watching like all the teams double and triple, you could kind of see and feel that bloat and that bureaucratically charged inefficiency that exists in an organization, almost like a cancer.
Does that have to do with scale? Do you think that metastasizes more with scale?
I think it does with people.
Okay.
I think like regardless of what you're doing or the scale or the dollars involved, especially like with the AI stuff now, there's a lot of companies that are getting to like millions in revenue or billions in revenue, and the headcounts are smaller and smaller than they've ever been. So I don't necessarily think it's always like a scale thing. I think people are the most complex thing. And I think like orchestrating and organizing people at scale is really like what the best business people do. So yeah.
So how did you go from like, so you basically got an education that you couldn't pay for. It would have cost millions of dollars to get that education.
Yes. And I made so many mistakes, and so many people believed in me when I feel like I was probably a worthless employee at some point, including my dad and other people. And shout out to all those people that took a chance, because I'm very grateful. And that was all part of the process. And I think like whatever the cost of college is now and what it was in 2016, 2017, yeah, I don't think it would have been even close to like as valuable in like the return of information and experience that you get from just kind of being in the workforce. Obviously, not every profession is like that, but in like computer science and technology and marketing and design and media, like it's really all about the work that you do in your portfolio and what you can do. So like, yeah, I would just see people that would go to school for computer science, and like their senior project would be something that was like a random little side experiment tutorial thing that I would do on like a Tuesday night. And these were people that were like a couple years older than me,
right,
and just like really believed in the system. And I also realized, like, I observed that a lot of people that went through the system just like were a lot more methodically oriented and less probably spatially oriented. And so in like terms of how I operate, at least in like programming as like a developer, which is like one of the things I do, most developers are very focused on one thing. They're very methodical. You could kind of set them on a project and they'll work on it for a very long time. I'm kind of like all over the place.
Right.
The all over the placeness obviously has like weaknesses. But one of the strengths about it is that like you can kind of pull things from a lot of different places and mash them together to solve problems, which is not necessarily something like a typical engineer that works in a team of like 30 or 40 engineers does. They kind of just, they exist within the team, and somebody gives them tasks and they execute on those tasks. I don't really thrive in that kind of environment. So the TaxFile experience was good because I, once again, was getting paid to learn a lot about what I liked, what I didn't like. And I was getting paid to watch other people like in the C-suite of this company who I interacted with every day make mistakes that were very expensive mistakes that, like, of course I would not want to make again if I was in that position, or even if I knew somebody in that position. So you learn a lot from other people. You learn a lot from experience. TaxFile, ultimately, I left TaxFile to work on a startup. It was a fun experience. Didn't work out. It was kind of like probably the right idea, but a little bit too early. We were trying to do like a real estate, Robinhood for real estate type thing, which you could see Robinhood is kind of currently doing now, and they're working on lobbying that through its more so a securities and like compliance issue than it is like a technology thing when you're in financial technology.
So working with that, like securities is big deal stuff that you have to like make sure you get that right?
Yeah, and that was also an awesome experience working on that startup. You know, when I got involved, it wasn't my original idea for the company. When I got involved, I was naive and approaching it very much, once again, like it was a technology problem. And like I was the guy that had all these technology solutions. And the more and more we got into the business, the more and more I kind of realized it's actually everything except like the technology is the easy part. That's like the thing I do and I live and breathe every day. The hard part is, once again, like the coordination of people, the coordination of expectations. And then with the industry that we were in, the coordination of like our hopes and dreams and our like technological utopian ideas that we thought were possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the gap in between that bridged to what like the compliance framework for securities, the issuance of securities in the United States is, which like comes from laws that were written in the 40s.
The 1940s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like
after the stock market collapse and the bubble and the Great Depression and all that shit.
So a lot has changed since then. And the framework to be compliant hasn't changed. So a lot of these interesting ideas about like cryptocurrency and blockchain and this and that, a lot of it is interesting, but the problem is that the in financial technology, the compliance moves first. It's one of the only industries where it doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't really matter how good the technology is. Like the compliance and the law is the most important part. You have to follow the law first.
Right.
So yeah, the SEC's wild. And also there's other bodies like CFTC, FinCEN. There's actually a lot of different bodies in the United States that regulate the flow of money, the issuance of securities, the conversion of cash to digital cash, back and forth, vice versa. So I learned a lot about that. It was a very valuable experience. The company didn't work out, but very valuable experience. And I think probably laid a lot of the trajectory to like some of the stuff that I started working on right after that, which then led to more of like probably the general stuff that I'm doing now. So it's all good. It's all part of like a natural progression and following what I'm interested in and stuff, you know?
One of the things that I find fascinating about you is that you look at the world differently. And I mean this in an incredibly complimentary way, is that you look at the world, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you look at the world as like these systems, right? Are they efficient? Are they inefficient? Could they be better? Here's where the choke points are. Here's where we can correct them. And I think that comes from your experiences of watching, like you said before, when you work for the tax company, you see them make a very expensive mistake. And instead of like the people who are like, well, I didn't do that, that's not my problem. You looked at it as like, I'm going to put that in the memory bank to make sure that like that never happens again. And that you're always like cognizant of like how it works. I'm almost assuming that like you look at the world like Neo sees the Matrix in a weird way, but you've always explained things to me in a way that is just so easily palatable for me to understand in the simplicity of how like interactions and things work together. Is that fair?
That's very kind. I thank you for those.
You're
words.
welcome. You're welcome. So I bring that up because like this is a very complicated world that we're living in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of fast changes happening. And I think that, you know, because of your background in media and technology and, you know, dealing with parts of the world that most people don't deal with, it gives you an incredibly unique perspective to kind of enlighten people on, you know, especially right now, like AI, tech, the data centers, which is a really big concern for a lot of people around here, but most people don't even know what they are. Like most people don't know what goes into them. Most people don't know who uses them. Most people don't know how they operate. So I was hoping that like you could kind of like take us on like a little journey about like how these things work, who uses them, who builds them, what is the incentive structure behind building them. You know, you like without like spoiler alert anything, you know, I want to kind of lead us on like this little journey. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
So can you tell me what a data center is?
Yeah. So the cloud that everybody thinks is
in the sky?
It's not in the sky. It's a network of buildings that are connected with cables. And inside those buildings, there are computers that pretty much are either doing one of two things: storing information or processing information and running procedures on things, or serving information.
What sort of industries or people use these things?
Well, every industry probably that you can think of. There are data centers that are the backbone of pretty much everything on the internet. Everything from the most basic services like banking or going to your government website, or buying a pair of shoes, to pretty much all forms of entertainment,
like streaming, YouTube,
everything. The internet is a network of just massive clusters of computers that are storing and serving information. Over time, the economic incentives aligned around people being able to kind of become landlords of the infrastructure of the internet. And so that's basically what it is. That's what a data center is. That's what Amazon Web Services business is. That's what a lot of these companies are doing. Now, there's companies that are landlords of those companies. There's companies that are like real estate investment trusts that are landlords that will then bring in other companies that might be then subletting rack space or compute or storage to their customers. Mm-hmm. And most of these companies that do provide the buildings and the hardware, they're also providing a degree of infrastructure and software around that to interface with it and provide services to customers. So people build businesses around this, like YouTube, Facebook. They all have information, lots of it, and all of that information is stored in data centers.
So every photo you upload, every interaction that you have, I mean, everything gets basically cataloged, right? Especially on like social media, something like social media.
Yes. A company like Facebook, their incentive is to make money on attention. The more attention that they could capture of the overall total addressable market of all attention, the better they are positioned as like an advertising company. It's kind of why like advertising, even though there was never like a big meeting where people were like, oh, let's plan for advertising to take over the world, or right, like ruin somebody's, have all these negative effects. It eventually turns out that as a result of bad incentive alignment and poor structuring of like the rules of the game, a company like Facebook, which originally kind of was mostly good. I mean, yeah, there were still bad things that happened in the early days of Facebook, but the general idea of connecting people across the world, finding family members that are lost, right, connecting with friends, these are good things. These are good ideas. Where it goes wrong is like the infinite feed that has the same psychological design as a slot machine to play into your brain so that you're sitting there just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and it's taking you through a matrix of emotions, because they've realized, like doctors and scientists have sat and studied millions of samples of this behavior and determined like, oh yeah, that's the best way to keep them engaged. And so that's like where all this stuff starts to become a problem, is like Facebook's incentives are not necessarily aligned with what I would maybe consider like optimal for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right. They're more so optimal for like Facebook's ability to capture attention.
And when you say capture attention, it's when you look at the people who are just, that's all they're doing.
Every
like
time
that lights in their eyes.
Every time you open up Facebook, every single thing you're doing is being monitored. How long you look at something, how fast you're scrolling, everything you could possibly think of, and so many things that I can't even think of, they are tracking. And they feed that to machines, massive AI systems and machine learning algorithms that can then detect patterns and common features among what gets people to spend more time. And that's how a lot of the user interface design is really being done. It's not like what's best for people, maybe, and I don't know, maybe this isn't what would be best for people, but just an idea. What if instead of like an infinite feed that's like kind of like a whirlwind of maybe.
Now, when you say infinite feed, what was that called? Somebody invented that. It was the...
Well, yeah, the people from... I don't know what it was called. I think it was the infinite scrolling.
That's the infinite scroll. That's what it's called.
Ari Raskin from Pinterest, I believe, was the guy who came up with this. He later... And he's actually the son of a very prolific Apple founding team developer, Bill Raskin. They originally developed this for Pinterest. It was not originally intended to turn out this way. It was just a nice design. And of course, over time, they realized it was not only a nice design, but it was optimal for like the least amount of friction in terms of like, how do you get people to move through state in an interface? Like there's only a certain number of ways to do it.
Right. Okay.
You could go through a carousel, you could scroll down a thing, and so they realized that this particular format was particularly effective. And then once they realized the format's good, they start testing, okay, what could we throw in this thing, and how do we see, like, we could turn some dials here and turn some dials there, and we're going to see what works the best. And then we're going to keep dialing in the system to whatever is best for our advertising revenue, which is very dark.
Because nobody pays for a subscription for Facebook.
Yeah.
So the advertiser revenue is very invaluable.
Yes. And the classic line of like, yeah, if you're not paying for it, you are the thing that's being sold.
Yes.
Which is not a secret. Facebook's not mandatory, but it's a lot of the internet. And most of the internet, at least a lot of the freemium internet, works, the same way that Facebook does. The big advertising industry is huge. I still do some work in marketing and advertising, but I also took a general step and distance away from a lot of the things in the industry, because it does start to get to the point in like tracking technology and digital advertising where, you have clients that basically are willing to do anything to get people to click or go to their website. And that's like a very interesting thing. Sometimes it's not necessarily good, like what they want to do, or the best ways in which to do that.
So when you say that, like, turn the knobs, blah blah blah, is that like a universal knob turn, or is that very specific to the individual knob turns?
It's probably very multivariate.
Okay.
I don't know how deep it goes, but my assumption would be that it's probably very fractal. They probably have, I know for a fact they have national wide tests. Like when they removed in Instagram, I remember when they started removing the number of likes or whatever. Mm-hmm. I remember they were testing that in Europe first. So they do national level tests, of course, but I'm sure they do tests down to like the hundreds of people.
But so like what I see on Facebook and what you see on Facebook, are they the same thing?
No, your Facebook is highly
catered,
optimized, curated for you. And mine is for me,
which is to keep you infinitely scrolling.
Yeah.
Right.
So like, I love animals. Facebook loves to show me both extremes of the animal world, like the most sad animal videos you could possibly think of, and then the most happy animal videos you could think of. And they'll sprinkle that in there with like interesting technology videos, maybe like a philosophy clip, maybe like a business guy, and then like an interesting like jazz musician.
And this has been the thing that this is the evolution.
And I'm aware of this, and I get sucked into it.
Well, that's the scary thing.
Yeah. So this is powerful stuff. And there's a lot of like neuroscience and psychology that like people have written papers about this. There's doctors, so many doctors, and like actual scientists that sit around and think about this stuff 24/7 and how to optimize for attention. So yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. And that's like, unfortunately, when I look at things in terms of like, why is something terrible? Why is it the way that it is? Like 99% of the time, there was never like there wasn't like a meeting where they all sat around and they were like, this is the master plan. And there's like some guy who's the guy. It's usually like much more fractal than that. And it's like poor incentive alignment across a large number of people and institutions. So like if we were playing Monopoly with 20 people, mm-hmm. and like some guy figured out how to beat everybody because some like fatal flaw of the rules of the game, And he was able to exploit that over and over and over again. And none of us even were able to comprehend what he was exploiting.
Mm-hmm.
And we were playing for money. He would keep doing that over and over and over again, infinitely. And then the others at the table would eventually, at all costs, figure out what he was doing. And then eventually we would all be doing it. And it would be like a race to the bottom. We would all be equal eventually at the end.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if you look at why so many things are messed up, it's because of that. Like the
race to the bottom.
The social media stuff is all generally, it does a lot of harm. I don't know if I could say it does more harm than good. I don't know if I could say it does more good than bad.
But you don't run into people who are like, this is the best. I feel so good from doing this.
And there's many studies to support the idea that it does a lot of harm. And the level of harm is very dangerous. Like the suicide rates in the teens, like for younger kids, going way up, and they try to attribute it to all these other things except for the timing of when all these social media things became popular.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like I am relatively aware of the effects that it has on me. And there's like there's maybe three components. There's like a family and friends component, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a business component, which is generally good. Not always the best, because you start comparing yourself to people that are across the country or the globe, and that's not necessarily healthy.
Right.
And you're not necessarily supposed to be aware of like everybody's problems and issues.
Right.
You can only have so much RAM or processing power. Like there's a lot. So the internet, like consuming the information, comes at like a cost in like your passive
a psychological, emotional, and literally like a bandwidth issue, right?
Yeah. And then I think the third worst part of it is like the entertainment side of it, which is like how you get sucked in infinitely, and part of the whole design. And there's books about this. Like I've read them. I am like a product designer. I build software, and you know, it's very, very interesting how simple some of the frameworks and the systems are. Like there's a guy Nireyal, Nireyal, and he wrote a book called Hooked: How to Build Habit Forming Products. And that's like one of the gold standards in Silicon Valley. That's one of the gold standards at many of these software companies in terms of how to build addicting things. And the system and the framework is literally this, like the same thing as a slot machine. It's the same exact thing.
Yeah, and anybody who's been to Vegas knows how.
And it requires an investment, a variable reward.
Okay.
And then like basically like an increased, like the more you invest into it, then the harder it is to pull out of it. And the more easy it is for you to double down without even thinking about it, because you say, oh, well, I already spent 5 minutes on it. I already spent 5 hours on it. I already spent $500 on it. I may as well try and recover.
Right.
And there's like a compounding effect to that. And like a trigger. So it's
is that most of social media?
Yeah, I mean, I think X has been relatively better since Elon took over. But what's gotten worse, in my opinion, is the curation of the feed. I think sometimes it's better.
Like the For You or the following?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's better. But I think generally it's heading in a weird direction. And like there's other weird things that X is doing. Like, for example, have you realized this thing where now like every time you click a website, it's automatically opened?
Yes.
Think about the impact that has on the advertising industry.
In what way?
Let's just say X was a generally underperforming ad medium in terms of clicks, which it typically was. You didn't advertise on Twitter for clicks. If Twitter adds this prefetching feature, which that's what's happening. So every time a link comes up, they prefetch it so that when you click it, it's already opened.
Oh, so like...
So that means that every impression is a page view in somebody's analytics on their website.
For their ad. Or just
not for
just for the website
not
in general.
for their ad, but...
So X is preloading the website, which is a click, right?
Yeah, think of it just in terms of like maybe... I wouldn't accuse them of this, but it might look a lot like pumping their numbers, right?
Gotcha. Okay.
It's showing that X is attributing all this traffic but the traffic is actually garbage because most of it is never even being opened by the people. It's being prefetched and never clicked on. So
which is like saying 10,000 cars drive past this billboard, but only 14 people might look at it.
Yeah,
right?
and the bounce rates are very high.
Right.
So like the number of people that do open it, then a very high percentage of them just close it within 2 seconds and they don't even click anything. So that's like all part of X. You have to show a return now that Elon bought it. He's trying to improve the ad product. So one of the ways to improve the ad product is you can boost the bottom line, the floor of the organic product, because the organic product is not helping in the fact that it's not a link driving medium. Twitter was not usually a link driving medium. That's why like you'll see stuff when they talk about the algorithm of Twitter, you should post your links in the follow-up, the reply, and not the main tweet. If you post a link in the main tweet, the tweet gets penalized because and Facebook is the same way, by the way.
Okay.
When you post like a Twitter link on Facebook or whatever, Facebook is penalizing you for that because you're saying, hey,
that's why they say link in comments.
You're saying, look at me, everyone. I have a new place for you to go. So Facebook is like, no, we don't want to steer people away from here.
Right.
So that's why like basically every single platform, whether they admit it or not, they do not incentivize linking outbound from the platform. They want you to stay. And then when they do implement the outbound link, usually it's in a new tab so that when you close the tab, you're always back to where you're falling back on what you were on. So that's like very important to the platforms.
Where does AI start to mess around with, let's say, all of that? Is AI going to do the engineering for these platforms now? Or like the product development stuff?
AI itself has been around for a long time.
Can we explain? I know this is a crazy question, but can we explain what AI is for the Luddites who don't know? The two people?
Yeah, I mean, in its most basic form, if you take the two words artificial intelligence, it's building systems with computers that are artificially intelligent. What does that mean? Well, like that means you're creating things that can solve unique problems out of like nothing. You know, you're writing code, you're mashing together bits and bytes to create systems that are generally intelligent at various tasks. For a long time, most artificial intelligence was more in the machine learning realm of like statistics and mathematics.
Like run these equations or variables or...
Yes. The language processing, the video stuff, the photo generation, like the diffusion models, that's all relatively new. The research and the development for it is not new. Once again, a lot of very, very smart people that have been like committing their life's work on this stuff in labs for 10, 20 years, working on some of these things. The last 5 years have been ridiculously progressive, exponentially progressive in terms of like the paradigm shift and language processing, and then image generation and video generation and processing has really reached kind of like that moment where I forget what it's called, but like when the famous chess player lost to the computer for the first time, it was like a real shift where people were like, whoa.
Yeah.
But then they're like, all right, well, it can't do all these other tasks. Now we're at like that next step where it's like the systems can do a lot of other tasks. They can do a lot of things. It's amazing. It's very scary. It's also amazing. I do a lot of programming work. I do a lot of work with custom code, data analysis, visualizations, custom application design and development. In the last 2 years, it went from me writing 80% of the code and another guy and a couple of other guys writing 20% of the code, or maybe even vice versa. My assessment might be way off, but humans writing 100% of the code. Me only worrying about the things that I could worry about that I liked to do, and all the things that I was afraid of, which was probably 20 or 30% of the stack at the time, I would have other people do because I would say it's a waste of my time. I'm going to be slower. I don't even like doing it. Now with the AI, we've reached a point where the AI is both better than me and all the other people that I ever had. And it writes 99% of the code in my company. and the production is, I have to do a real measurement of this because I've been talking to a lot of people about this and I don't know the real number, but I would say it's very, very easy to say it's at least 10x what it was pre-AI. It might be more than that. I don't want to say a crazy number and it not be accurate.
Like your output?
Yeah, the number of projects, the ability to, I used to have a list. I still do, but it's much smaller now. I used to have a list of like side project ideas and I would never be able to develop them. Too much time, not enough time, too many ideas. And the cost of like picking the wrong thing usually was what I had to pay. I would pick one and then like a couple weeks into it, I'd be like, this was not the... So, that was like how it always used to be. Now, the backlog of ideas, pretty much every single idea is built out at some point, and every single idea is experimented with. Like I could be walking with my dog, typing into an app in my phone, and it's like generating a V1 of an app for me. And not all the time, certain times I'm evaluating different things. Sometimes I'm like just trying to work out a random UI concept in my mind. I'm like, oh, how might I visualize this? Or how might I visualize that on a website or in a web app? But then in another instance, I might be saying, I have this idea for an app and I just want you to help me think about like the marketing page and like work out how it all might look and how it would be positioned and marketed. Because sometimes that's everything.
Sure.
And yeah, like the ability for the systems to flesh out these ideas and get to go from like a 0 to 1 is unbelievable. Like I used to spend hours on like boilerplate just to set up like a new website. If I was like custom programming a website, all like with React or whatever, I'd spend like at least an hour setting up all the boilerplate just to get it to the point where like I could update the code and publish it and it would work.
Right.
And now all that is instant. I can type in a prompt and like the pipeline is already there. And there's many, many competitors in a race to the bottom, like competing for my inputs as a developer to pay them to run that compute and generate that code for me, which is a crazy concept. Like if you told me this 3 years ago, no, probably not 3 years ago, probably 5 years ago, because I think it was starting to become a thing 3 years ago. If you told me this 5 years ago that this was going to be the reality, I never would have believed it. I would have said you were crazy and that it was impossible and that the nuance of code and people's different setups and edge cases and implementations was impossible for a computer to do. And now I can like 100% say it's better than any human. There's going to be edge cases where a human catches a thing that the machine does wrong. It happens all the time.
But the majority of it.
Yeah, when it's writing millions of lines of code and you're finding tiny little things here and there, the error rate is extremely low, much lower than yours would have been as a human, and it's doing it much faster and much cheaper, which is crazy.
So in terms of like, I think my original thought was like, so if AI, like at what point do we remove the humans from the equation, especially when it comes to like largely used things such as like social media? And I know social media is just one aspect of like AI and data centers, but
well, I think there's a couple components to it. First of all, I think the whole dead internet theory thing.
Can you explain that, the dead internet theory?
Yeah, just the idea that the internet is made up of a lot of people, but also a lot of machines that are pretending to be people for various reasons. There was not one meeting where there was one guy
who said who
was like, yeah,
we're going to make 800
this
million
was massive,
fake accounts.
Yeah, this is just, once again, massive incentive alignment across massive different, totally varying parties. You might have somebody who's trying to sell handbags off the street in New York versus some guy who's maybe very creepy and trying to do illegal things, luring a child or something.
Right.
And these are like two total polar opposite sides of the spectrum.
Doing the same thing.
Or you might have a nation state. that's trying to manipulate people's opinions on something, and they're trying to pretend to be another nation state.
And that is the creation of fake, not real people.
Yeah, it's the fake accounts that follow you and do friend requests, and they have 5 friends, and they have a generic name and a generic photo, and you think, what in the world could this possibly be? And most of the time, like, I don't think you're being targeted. I think it's like swarms. These are massive networks of these bots.
So the dead internet theory is that the majority of the internet, especially on stuff like social media, is not made up of real people.
Yes.
And what would be the downside to that? That's the cause. What's the effect of that? What does that do? Like you mentioned nation states, or, you know, let's look at it like 35,000.
I saw a scary video where a guy was talking about a paper that was written. I actually can't even remember the name of the city right now, but it was from the government, and they were talking about how you could, in theory, develop a social network, and if a bunch of people are having conversations casually in the social network, it would eventually, over time, become a place of trust. So if you coordinated conversations among a large number of people, and you threaded those in an organized way, where like one was a community of people who liked the color red, and then another one was a community of people who liked the color blue, and then another one, you know, and there's just all these different subsets that can be measured and isolated.
Mm-hmm.
That over time you could plant coordination. You could have people seed. If they become like a leader of these communities, they start to have very, very large influence and power over these communities. And there's like a fractal nature to this, but you can move a lot of opinions that way.
Almost like a group moderator. Would it be like that? Or is it just like it's just like an understood that this person or this thing is the authority?
It came out that the top city that was like made up of Redditors
in Alabama
was the same city. I don't think it's Alabama. I can't remember the city right now, but it's where I believe the naval intelligence like station is. And this particular intelligence group, they put out this paper about how you can build a network just like Reddit. Their description is right before Reddit was released, and it's almost an exact description of Reddit. And you could build a network like that, and then over time you can seed it with people, and these people can have massive amounts of influence over all sorts of things, whether it's steering commerce to somebody for a business, or to launder money, or swaying opinions for political reasons. It could be a bunch of different things.
Right.
So Reddit's an interesting one. The origins of Reddit are interesting. The people who control Reddit are interesting. The whole Ghislaine Maxwell Reddit thing is interesting.
Yes.
She had one of the top Reddit accounts, was one of the first. This is all alleged, but if you go and do research on this, there's a lot of people that write about it. I mean, the fact pattern is pretty clear, and it's strange.
What is the number one training website for ChatGPT?
Oh, Reddit also, yeah. So like that's another interesting component. If you have these AI systems in the future that rely on basically in simple ways, the average of all inputs that they are given, you can flood noise into that average of all inputs to change the signal, to manipulate the signal.
And it's so fucking dark, man. It's so weird and so like pull the veil.
But like, that's what's so crazy is that there's not one meeting. There's not one guy.
It's the George Carlin thing.
That's what's so dark.
You don't need a conspiracy when interests converge.
Yeah. So
like a formal conspiracy.
There was that Max Tegmark guy, and I know I've told you this before, but I'll say it just on here. There was that Max Tegmark guy who was on the Lex Friedman show.
Yeah.
And he was talking about this Meditations on Moloch poem. Not Moloch like the owl god, but Moloch being a fictional name that they assigned to this character who Allen Ginsberg writes this poem about. But this guy writes a response to the poem. And it's pretty amazingly written because he talks about a lot of classical problems. And the main kind of distillation is this idea that, like, if the rules of the game are messed up, people are going to basically destroy each other for the game. And it's such a fractal thing. It exists at like very, very high levels, and then it goes all the way down to like your community and your school and your household even. But once the incentives are misaligned, what probably, in my opinion, like life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is a good North Star.
Mm-hmm.
When they diverge from that, that's not good. And most of the things that are terrible, like, all converge back to this. And it's usually like the game was poorly designed. And usually that's because the game designers, it's like giving the fox access to the hen house. Like, you know, the people who write the rules to the game are usually the people who are benefiting the most playing the game.
Right. So
that is like a self-feeding mechanism that is not productive for everybody else. So yeah, the misalignment of incentives, it's like the most dark thing. It was like the theme of 2025 for me. And it's kind of dark. But
the misalignment of incentives?
Yeah,
for 2025.
Just realizing that that's like what a lot of the darkness comes from, and that like the only thing that really I could do sometimes is to try and exist in a whatever fractal version of things that I can control, and make it so that incentives are positively aligned with what's best for people. And that can be like all sorts of different things. You know, that can be like doing business with people, but it could also be just like how things in your community can function, or in your family, or really anything. The alignment of incentives is like very important. And sometimes like it's very easy to sacrifice the long-term alignment of incentives for some sort of short-term gain.
Sure.
And that can come at like a very high cost over time.
Can that explain the fervor right now to build data centers? Because what is the long-term look of that? Because you say like short-term right now, long-term not good.
Yes. So the data center thing is interesting. Obviously, for anybody who's been listening, I'm a big technology guy. I'm a big AI guy.
Yeah.
I also am able to say it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to have impacts on the economy, the job market. You know, it's had a huge impact on programming and everything. People can't get new graduates who had like a very clear path 6 years ago to like a great career. Doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, learn to code,
it's
right?
It's crazy. So the data center thing's interesting because you need the data centers. You need the backbone of the internet. You need the infrastructure. Ideally, we need it to get stronger. We need to invest more in it. We need to be able to serve more bandwidth. We need to be able to process more information. I think these are all things everybody should be able to agree on. But then the next step is that when I talk to people that are in other countries, they talk about the United States and they say, one of the best things about the United States is that it's like the only G7 country. It's really the only country that has protected property rights for over 100 years.
Yeah, most people don't know that.
So land is really interesting. It's really important, and it's finite.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like very interested in land. I love parcel data. I love maps. I love land. It's so interesting.
I love land.
Who owns it, the history of it,
Yeah.
the use of it, the development of it, how it changes over time. Because I believe so many things relate back actually to the land, and so many answers to things exist in so many basic things, like who owns the land and who's being taxed on the land, and
right.
all of that. The data center thing, when people say they don't want one in their backyard, I think that's another fact that everybody should be able to agree on.
Okay.
So I'm trying to, I guess, start this by saying like, these are the things that I would hope people could all agree on.
Yeah. I agree with you so far.
I don't want one of these in my backyard, probably. We need them.
Right.
We could also all agree that there's like, in a lot of instances, a short-term promise of financial incentives with these things. So you could say that's a benefit. But you could also say that there's a lot of potential risks. Both the physical risk of like destroying wildlife to develop this thing, which might not even be needed. That's a whole rabbit hole we could go down.
Mm-hmm.
Might not even be needed in 10 years, 5 years, due to the rate of the increase in power density or progression of compute and Moore's law.
Mm-hmm.
And there's kind of a whole case where right now there's a lot of incentives in the short term to build these things. There's a lot of banks. There's a lot of developers. There's a lot of people in real estate. There's a lot of people that own land that are all financially incentivized to make this go. Big tech has a lot of money. Big tech also has the ability to round up capital from a lot of different places. So the amount of money in underwriting these types of deals is also crazy. There's a lot of money in data centers right now. The interesting thing is that if you're a shareholder of a lot of these companies that are pure data center companies or REITs that have data centers, the returns are not that great. And the profits are not necessarily being realized yet. And even a lot of the AI companies are not necessarily making money. You hear all the stories about OpenAI and how they're basically just hemorrhaging money.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire business is once again in a very difficult place because the rules of the game have been messed up. There's a race to the bottom between all the providers, whether it's OpenAI, Google, Microsoft. Well, Microsoft is OpenAI, Anthropic, any of the big boys. There's a competition between all of them to gather as many input tokens as possible. By input tokens, I mean like when you and I use AI. When anybody uses AI, they are talking to the machine and they're giving it an input. And these systems are being trained mostly by the new inputs that we're giving them and the types of conversations that we're having with these. We are becoming the trainers of the machines. Yes, there's people in these labs that are doing work. It's mostly alignment work, but they're capturing what we're doing and they're using that to improve the systems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a race between all these companies to gather as much input as possible, because if you had the smartest guy giving you all your inputs, then you would have the smartest output. Your system would be the smartest.
Right.
So there's all of these companies on a race to the bottom to make it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to gather up as much input as possible so that they can train new models and create more alpha on output. And most of that is being subsidized by like venture capitalists or public shareholders of companies, depending on the instance.
Mm-hmm.
And these companies are spending billions of dollars and they're not making that back. It's not marginally profitable what they're doing right now. So
that sounds dumb.
That's an interesting thing. Well, remember the whole like universal basic income thing and Andrew Yang?
Mm-hmm.
Those were interesting ideas, but at the time, you know, it was too early. People didn't understand what might happen with the job market. Obviously, universal basic income has a lot of problems. I'm not advocating for it at all.
Right.
But what's interesting is that I think the conversation about universal basic income is probably going to fade away quite a bit, as it already has.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to hear this new conversation of universal basic compute. And I think that's the thing that's probably the scariest, is that we probably are going to get to the point where the government is going to decide that due to the immense power and economic opportunity in AI and people using AI, every American should get access to a baseline level of AI products that are subsidized by the government.
What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, it could be something as simple as subsidies for development on like a very large federal level, funding for projects, the government co-investing in projects. But it could also span all the way down to like similar to how the Trump account is like a very low level thing and you can access it. Like they're going to have it in an app or whatever, and it'll be like a Robinhood kind of a thing. There might be a thing where similar to what they've now provided for the military, the AI portal thing where they're providing an AI portal where, did you see that?
I did not see that.
They came out with a thing.
Oh, is that why Hegseth was at like with Elon or something? Because X is
probably.
Like Grok is
they're
like
in there.
Yeah,
they're one of the. They might be maybe the only provider in there. I don't know. I don't have access. They built a portal for government employees in the military to be able to use like a government sponsored AI gateway. So the government pays for whatever they do. Obviously, they're studying and probably trying to build their own systems and make things better and dial in things or learn whatever. But I think that could even exist. There might be like a literal thing that as a U.S. citizen, they're like, yeah, download the app and you get access to like these 5 models who are all in like the sovereign wealth fund. Like this could happen. And that would be a form of the universal basic compute in a less direct way. It's probably not going to be like, we'll give you $20 a month towards your ChatGPT subscription. You know, it's never going to be that.
Yeah. Redeem
simple.
Your coupon code.
It's never going to be that simple. But I think when you look at the business of AI, all of the powers that be are incentivized in this race to the bottom for the tokens. So I don't know how that's going to last.
What does that look like if everybody stays on the same road right now without foresight? Or maybe they do have the foresight and they know it's coming or something's coming.
I
asked that because
the job market is in rough shape.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that.
It's scary. You know, I used to think like, I don't know, as I was saying, it used to be just a great thing to go to school for computer science and like you'd have a very clean path and multiple companies trying to hire you. Now like the average salaries have probably reduced by like 30 or 40% across the market.
For tech shit like that?
More like entry level. A lot of it's kind of like it's breaking up into the really senior people are getting paid more to have less employees and work more with AI. And then like the junior people are getting paid less and there are less and less positions. And there are less and less senior positions too. And then there's not really as much of a middle.
What does it look like in a few years if everybody keeps going the way they're going and most people don't have a job? Everyone who is relying on these career paths, like what do they do? Where do they go? What happens to them? Are they all working at Buc-ee's?
There's always going to be certain things we need. There's always going to be certain industries where, due to the incentive alignment of the insurance industry, there will never be no human. So like, for example, airline pilots or trucking, ones that people worry about sometimes, it's never going to happen. You're always going to have a guy behind the wheel who is liable in the event of an injury because there's a very large business and industry around those issues,
right?
The things that go wrongly in those scenarios, and they need somebody to blame and claim. So those probably won't be touched. But, you know, the programming thing is insane. And there's a lot of other things, like even I think a lot of legal work.
Sure.
You know, just a lot of the preparation of documents and templates and, you know, classical legal documents that are done over and over and over again. And even just analysis of legal documents or trying to understand the legalese in something and not having to pay a lawyer to translate it for you. You know, that's a lot of money that's being eroded from like the economy. So these are all interesting questions. Like, I don't know the answers. I think like
So the legal industry is going to reduce. Probably the medical industry is going to reduce. Like probably the more administrative stuff on the medical.
Definitely. I think, you're still going to have doctors, but even like
but they're reading better scans now. The AI is reading better scans than the doctor does.
Correct. I think, the education industry is maybe an important problem that is a prerequisite to a lot of these problems.
Like the education industry?
Well, yeah. Like, how do you fix... If the job market changes forever, we need to change the way in which we prepare people for the job market. That's for sure.
Totally, yeah.
To whatever the solution is or the optimal path. And the education industry itself is like a big victim of the misalignment of incentives. It's very overpriced. There's a lot of people that have the wrong incentives. It's not necessarily always about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or education and knowledge.
Right.
So I think the education industry has a lot of gutting to do, and there's probably a lot of reform to do.
Does that mean less teachers, less professors?
Yeah, and I think even less curriculum. I wouldn't be surprised if in 5 years or 10 years it's less schooling to be a lawyer or a doctor.
Okay.
I think the certifications and stuff are always going to exist. There's always going to be a layer of diplomacy, and there's going to be a layer of excellence and certification required, and like a bar, literally in legal. But I think maybe the standards might change if everybody has something in their pocket that's smarter than them and most people. The idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI, is interesting because a lot of people ask me about it. And I think it's like such a buzzword that's designed to be a buzzword. So this will all make sense in a second. Peter Thiel, the guy who invested in Facebook and has a lot of investments, Palantir, has a very interesting story.
Yes.
Peter Thiel wrote this book, 0 to 1. And in that book, he talks about monopolies and how to build a monopoly. And he says that all monopolies exist by claiming to be a part of something much larger than what they are. So like Google had a monopoly on search. They kind of don't anymore, which is interesting, but they had a monopoly on search for a long time. Google didn't call themselves a search engine. So even though when you look at their market share and the way that the market positioning had been at the time with Yahoo and AOL, Google was 100% like a monopoly. But in antitrust proceedings, Google would say, we're not a search company, we're an advertising company.
Really?
And then when it's advertising, well, that's like a $50 or $80 billion around the world annually industry worldwide. So, they're a much smaller dent in that, and it becomes a much harder argument to say we're not a monopoly, we're an advertising company, and we don't even do 1% of the volume. So it's interesting that he says that, because a lot of times you don't really realize how big something is until it's too late and how much of a monopoly it really is.
Mm-hmm.
What were we just saying right before that?
Oh, you were we were talking about I forget. I totally blanked. When you talk, it's like listening to a poet. Like I get like lulled into it.
No, that's all right. I get distracted.
No, you were talking about like the how do we get into monopolies? Because I was asking like where does it go? Like we were talking about education. We were talking about like who's going to who's not going to have jobs. What's going to happen with because you were talking about education. That's where it was going. Do you want me to move on?
Yeah, it'll probably come back.
So you have like this foresight perspective on it. because you're also familiar with history. So you see like these patterns and like where things are going, right? Mm-hmm. So like for the normal average, you know, you said before that you fit in like whatever part of the fractal that you fit into. Mm-hmm. What I think people need to understand, like potentially what the outcome could be. Like there's good and bad to things. Like I always look at new technology as like, I always like reduce it down to like a hammer. Like you can use it to build homes for people, or you can use it to kill people. It's just how you use it. And what is like, for people who don't know what all of this means and they're just living their lives, not concerned about it. Like, because I went to that data center meeting last night, and one of the questions I asked was in front of the whole crowd, I said, how many people have gave a damn about data centers until 2 weeks ago? Mm-hmm. And it was like only like 25% of people put up their hands, which means to me that the majority of the people have no idea like what's coming down the pike potentially. Mm-hmm. So like in this area specific, like they're talking about like using AI for construction, for surgery, for all these crazy things. And you know, somebody like Elon is convinced that that's going to happen in the next 5-6 years. So this area is pretty blue collar. What does that mean for like their children? What does that mean for like their current jobs? You know, are we going to hit a depression or some sort of, is there going to be chaos in the streets, dogs and cats living together? Or what is it going to look like? Or is this going to be like this slow, because I don't think anybody's preparing anybody for, you know, losing their medical job or their teaching job or.
So I try very hard to believe in the idea that there was this whole movement last year called effective accelerationism.
Never heard of it.
And it was the idea that if we as a civilization move forward and up on the Kardashev gradient, which is basically the scale of civilization's productivity based on the amount of energy that it consumes. So the idea that like if a civilization continues to consume more energy, then it will be producing more output that is valuable.
Right.
I try to subscribe to the ideas put forth in this effective accelerationism movement, which are like technology has always been a bit scary. In many times there have been challenges that have come up, forks in the road where people may heavily disagree on what the right thing to do is. Mm-hmm. But I do like to believe that over time, the long term, good things win, and that progress and humanity will move forward. That's just like a positive disclaimer, I guess.
Okay.
I think maybe what we were talking about before the monopoly thing was about the land and the data centers.
Yeah.
You know, the land is kind of important in the game of Monopoly, but also real life. Like a lot of the lessons in the game of Monopoly are lessons that you could also learn much more expensively in real life. Mm-hmm. The data centers, the alignment of incentives to create them is we need to basically build the biggest, best one right now that is connected to the highways of interconnection, usually being water, power, fiber, the three things you need. Who can build the biggest, best, cheapest one right now? And that's not good. Like, the incentive is aligned with humans and residential housing and what people need.
Right.
Like wherever the cheapest interconnects are, that's where like a lot of people are. So of course they want that because it's cheapest to connect to everything that's already piped in that humans paid for. But now we're competing with space for humans versus space for machines. And the value of the machines has exceeded the value of the humans. What the humans can pay to rent and buy the space and the land has exceeded what humans can pay.
Can you explore that concept for a moment? Because it's a really interesting moment in history where the machines have now...
Well, in a very dark way, I used to have a lot of people that worked with me on like programming projects. I don't have anybody that works with me on programming projects anymore. I don't need it. I don't need the extra help. The computer's better. The AI is better. My ability to have a relationship with the computer is better.
Okay.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
My ability to work through issues and ideas and language barriers, everything is better. The only thing that you don't get from it is like human connection, which of course comes at a cost. But from like a business perspective, there's like a massive economic incentive for like when people talk about spending money as a business, when my business is spending more on AI tools, that's usually good for our business because the AI tools are a fraction of what humans would cost. And if we're spending a lot on these tools, we're probably producing a lot.
Right.
So the more that we're producing, the more we're exponentially saving on what would be human labor cost, which is really currently arbitrage, like market opportunity in the market, like people who don't do it versus people who do it. If you're building with AI, you could build like 10 times faster, cheaper, better. So there's like a race and there's arbitrage and there's money to be made there. So that's kind of interesting because now you've got computers and like most developers who still have a job, they all have at least one of these, if not multiple of these agents that they're working with that are a computer all day pretty much serving their requests. And like they're paying a rate for that. I'm paying a rate for that. When these landlords can take thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of these and put them into one building, the total rents that can be paid, which is kind of this long value chain. It's like me paying the vendor for the tokens, the vendor's paying the landlord for the space. They paid somebody for the hardware. They're paying somebody for the fiber connection. Mm-hmm. Like there's this whole chain of value. There's way more money in that now than there is in like providing a house for Jim and Johnny or Susie and Stacy.
Which means this is taking priority over human beings.
Yes. So we have finite resources, or we have resources that are scarce. And now we're having real conversations where people are saying that it makes more sense to allocate those resources to the computers than it is to the people.
That's crazy.
And, you know, I say these things and people that are 100% pro data center would probably say, well, like you can't be 100% anti, and I'm not 100% anti. I would like to say I'm like neutral on the issue, and that the things that I say most people should agree with. The real way I think how do you solve the data center problem? You have to fix the incentive alignment issue. The incentives are misaligned. What's best for the data center developer is not what's best for the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness of John Doe in middle America, especially in the town that you're putting the data center in. So what might be a good idea? I don't know. What if the government provided stimulus or subsidy for developers to develop land where there are no connections and there is no power grid? To me, that seems like a much better idea. Yeah, of course it's going to be more expensive. That's why nobody wants to do it. Nobody's going to want to do it if they're in the business of it, because that's like saying, oh, you have an ice cream shop? All right, well, do you want to pay triple the cost of your input materials and keep running your business?
Yeah, nobody's going to do that.
No, nobody wants to do that. So they have a right to say no. They have a right to say we don't want to do that. But the government has the ability to make the incentive so good that eventually they will do that.
Why do you think all of them are popping up everywhere? Like all of us, like it wasn't a thing, and now all of a sudden it's a thing. Like I have my theory.
There's been a massive influx in the capital.
From where?
All over the place. both internationally and nationally. I mean, there's so many banks, there's so many private equity funds, there's so many hard money lenders, there's so much private capital interested in the data center opportunity. And there's a capital stack. There's like retail on one spectrum, who always pays the worst price. Retail pays the most, right? If you buy a REIT with data centers in it, the returns are the lowest. The guy over here on the other side of the spectrum who took the most risk, who bought the land and then flips it to the data center, he's probably going to make the most money. Or like marginally speaking, like, you know, there's like this very clear spectrum, and there's all these layers to like the amount of risk that you're taking and where you exist in that. And even once the real estate is developed, there's this whole capital stack of debt in the commercial real estate. Like there's so much financing, and there's layers and layers and layers to it. There's people that finance things and then they refinance them in packages to people. And then there's people that break up those packages and then refinance that to somebody else. And every time it's getting financed, or like every layer, there's like small bits of interest and money being made and fees on those deals. And so the underwriters of that, there's a big industry around that. So that's a big thing. There was federal stimulus for the data center stuff already. Like the development, there's a lot of like, you know, the LRTA and the
that kind of blew my mind when I
tax
found that
abatements that stem all the way from federal down to local level that exist in various different places. And then there's also this whole, right now, obviously due to the surge in popularity of AI, obviously that's why like the volumes and the amount of energy that they need to spend, which unfortunately, like most of it's probably waste. I don't want to say waste, but like most of it's like monkey JPEGs that are made with AI. You know what I'm saying? Like the content, the majority of the processing power that's being allocated. It's not like it's all 100% high IQ stuff. It's not like it's all people scanning x-rays or analyzing legal documents or writing code or
make the picture of this person look like they're farting.
Correct.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Correct. It's a lot of it's silly, but the massive increase in demand has put a strain on the existing infrastructure that exists. And the ante or the price that companies are willing to pay for reliable uptime and secure facilities where they can invest in hardware that is very dense. Like we're talking, the types of machines that are in these things are not like computers that we would have in our houses. These are like racks of industrial designed machines that are usually extremely expensive. One rack could be a couple hundred to millions of dollars, and the amount of power that one rack could consume, like you're talking data centers could consume as much power as 25,000 to 100,000 homes in
like one building or the whole campus?
One building.
So like, does that mean like a campus would use more, like potentially hundreds of thousands of homes power?
I knew somebody that was in Bitcoin mining in South Carolina, and they were the largest consumer of power in South Carolina, and they had like less than 20 Bitcoin mining sites.
The largest consumer of power in South Carolina.
So the density, the people do not understand the density of the consumption of the power that's in these things. And that's why the electricity is getting so much more expensive. Don't get me wrong, the electric cars don't help. The increased, and I have an electric car, by the way.
I know.
But the increase in demand in electricity is creating a lot of opportunity, because there's once again a lot of incentives that align around where it all starts with the power lines. It starts with the power lines. Once the infrastructure is in place, you got all the landowners, the speculation, the risks that they take, make big returns on flipping that land. Look at what happens in Loudoun County, like the $1 per acre return of what people are selling now down there. The going rate is unbelievable. It's generational wealth. So
it's no different than finding like an oil field under your farm.
Yeah. So from the whole journey all the way to the last step of building the data center, all the way till after that, putting tenants in the data center and managing the data center and its tenants. There's a whole massive industry around that. And unfortunately, it's not local. It's not fractal, really. It's very consolidated and it's very monopolistic. And it's very much like, what people would describe as not a monopoly, but is a monopoly. The idea, in my opinion, I would like to see any type of facts that would dispute this, because I really haven't. In my opinion, the idea that there's going to be a bunch of jobs when they're building all these data centers, there won't be. There will be probably temporary jobs, not a lot of them, because a lot of the people come in from, like, when an Amazon Web Services is going to put in a data center, they're not going to hire a company from Scranton, PA to build it.
Yeah.
They have people that have built like 100 of these things.
So they want the pros.
And they want the cheapest one. They already probably got this guy into some arrangement where he'll do 100 of them for some discounted price.
Yeah, and they probably know that, like, these are possibly on the schedule in 2 years from now or something like that, right?
Yeah. So, land is finite, and it definitely makes me sad at the idea that, like, people destroy, like, woods in between neighborhoods, and people don't really care about some of these basic things. Like, once again, I think anybody who says, oh yeah, I'd be fine with one of these in my backyard, I don't think they've seen it.
No.
Like, the scale. I don't think they've heard the buzzing. By the buzzing, I mean, like, the sound of the generators, the sound of the fans, the sound of the machines outside of the buildings. That never goes away. Even when you have a site that is running on power lines, it's going to have generators for fallback power.
Big diesel generators, right?
Yes. And big diesel generators, if you know anything about them, you don't just not run them. You can't just not run them. You have to regularly run them. Like,
just to make sure that it's lubed up and ready to go in case something happens. You have to maintain them. To maintain them, you have to operate them.
Yes. I'm not a
diesel mechanic.
I'm not a diesel mechanic. I'm not a technician like that. But, it's not like these things can't even sit for weeks. Like, they need to be regularly running.
Yeah.
And when you have hundreds of them, there's usually always some running, because you can't be monitoring everything at once. So they'll stagger it, and they'll do that for, like, load reasons. There's all sorts of reasons and tests and things that they do. But
can I ask you about power?
Yeah.
You're the one who told me that what was the school that did the study? The college that did the study on the infrastructure in the Northeast?
So this was great. Texas.
How you look at it.
Texas A&M.
Okay.
They did this thing called the Power Supply Vulnerability Index study. They just produced this report a few months ago. And they essentially took, probably from the federal, I don't know where the data comes from. I should know. Probably from federal, like Department of Energy. They took all of the state reported data, which goes down to the county level, of power outages. And then they measured it over a long period of time. And they found, to a very staggering degree, I don't remember the exact number at this time, to a very staggering level, the rate, or the reliability of your power is measurably worse than it ever has been. The likelihood that you're going to get a power outage is higher now than it's ever been. Lackawanna County is very high in this overall index. It's like above the 90th percentile.
Not good.
No. So that's another interesting thing, is that we have infrastructure that's failing at higher and higher rates. It's getting more expensive. And instead of fixing the service and the uptime and the reliability, they're more prioritizing, we need to serve these new data center customers. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, They should be serving the needs of the existing customers. It's 2026. Wouldn't you think that the rate at which you're going to get a power outage is like lower than your grandparents was?
You'd think that.
So that's kind of crazy. The Luzerne County as well, very high. I think Luzerne County might be higher than Lackawanna County, but both above the 90th percentile in the entire country in terms of worst power supply vulnerability rating. So like
how do they expect like I think there's like 3 or 4 projects that are on the planning phase is not totally approved yet, all through Lackawanna County, right? Up the valley. I was just at the one that was ransom last night. I think there's an elephant one and like another one, and there's plans for other ones. So if our power infrastructure is at the point it's at right now, how do they put those in?
It's interesting, isn't it?
I mean, if that's your answer.
My understanding from talking to people who've worked at PP&L,
because it seems like you need enough infrastructure for potentially, Lackawanna County is like what, 214,000 residents or something.
Well, so there's a difference between the overall available bandwidth of like how much power exists or they could get here versus the reliability of the infrastructure.
Okay.
But like if I'm an infrastructure provider and I have, the entire state of Pennsylvania as my customer and I'm providing them a service and it's getting worse over time, I would be focused on making their service more reliable. I would not be focused on getting more customers.
Unless it's like back to that race to the bottom thing. It's like we're paying.
Well, it's poor incentive alignment. Nobody drew this up. There wasn't one guy. There wasn't one meeting. And somehow here we are. And you've got guys like John Zola.
Okay.
And they're trying to put the power lines in his backyard on his family property. And the way they treat him is like garbage.
Yeah.
And, there's no care about anything really. Long-term effects. No care for private property. And these are not, people say eminent domain and like railroads. Like this isn't really the same thing.
It's not a public use or something, right?
Railroads also delivered physical goods that had this constraint of physical nature, right? Like you can't teleport physical goods.
Train cars,
right? You have to have the train track. You have to get it there.
Yeah.
The whole data center thing is interesting. Like it's different, Yes. Is it optimal for example, the New York Stock Exchange? Is it optimal for all of the servers of all the financial companies to be as close to New York and New Jersey as possible? Yes, because they're constrained by the physical bandwidth and the speed at which the data can be moved through the cables underground.
Yeah, milliseconds mean billions.
Yes, it's amazing. So, you can't say that it's not important for everybody, but there's a large number of internet traffic and customers that would not really be harmed by a 25 to 75% increase in latency, because we're talking like tens and hundreds of milliseconds in terms of like the speed at which it might take for you to connect to an Amazon server in New York from here versus connecting to one in Utah from here. Like it's imperceptible. It's not that crazy
for the
difference
user.
For the average person.
Yeah.
It matters for certain industrial scale things, and you're always going to need industrial level infrastructure and geographic distribution. There's not one area that's king. New York is only really king for financial, but then there's other areas that are very important for other things. And like the routing of information, for example, Ashburn, Virginia, not a lot of it's, I'm sure there's financial information there, but a lot of it's government information.
Well, the Ashburn, Virginia is the end of literally the railway from Washington, D.C. ends in Ashburn. That's where a lot of people that work in D.C. live.
Yeah. It's an amazing place down there with all of the data centers and what has kind of happened. I mean, what it's done to the real estate market, what it's done to the nature. I don't think there is like a real community down there. It's very transient.
Yeah. And it's in a lot of imports and a lot of, one of the things that Jamie said to me, because he took a group of people down, I think it was Sunday or Monday. Like he took 2 township supervisors down there. And the thing that like struck them was that there was no people. Like they were at the park. There's no people.
Yeah.
They went to like they described it as like a T in the middle of like the data centers that was supposed to be like, coffee shops, restaurants, stuff like that. He's like, we went there at noon for lunch and there was nobody there. So like, how do they stay open? How do they like it's almost like the Chinese building those cities that nobody lives in. It's like, is it a facade? Is it an illusion?
Well, this is where the business of AI is very important, because if we're taking these types of footprints of land and resources and we're making these big bets in development of land and taking that from other people that could be living there when housing is expensive, it's interesting that not a lot of people care much about the physical aspects of computing, and that the rate of progression is exponential. So the amount of space that you need to process the same amount of information now versus 20 years ago, right? You ever see the pictures of the first computer? That's the most extreme example.
It's like
an entire room.
Yep.
So we're dealing with that too. So when they build out billions or trillions of dollars right now, like a lot of that value is depreciated and eroded very quickly from just the nature of the business. And it's like, I kind of call it like a Ponzinomics thing, where it doesn't survive without the next round of like suckers to kind of fall for it and get in on it. Like the data center thing, there's so much money in the capital expenditures of building these things, financing them, the land, the development right now. There's not a lot of money in the long term. There's people that make money in the maintenance and the service contracts and stuff like that, but most of that is leveraged, like debt based now at this point. And a lot of it's rolled up into like real estate investment trusts and stuff like that, who have serious monopolies on that type of work. So once again, these are not like job opportunities. These are not necessarily great things, in my opinion.
Let's say that they build one of these over on West Mountain, right? Because that's the one that's the most freshest in my mind. And I was talking to those people last night. What does that look like if they get to build it in 10 years? Like for them, like, is it like, are they better off having it or are they not? And are some of these places going to go under?
Here's what I say. This is the other thing, because this is an interesting question. I don't think the answer is probably binary, depending on where you live, depending on the style of your government.
Sure.
The people that were the people who elected the representation. The way I feel in a place like Scranton is that a lot of people like it here because it is big enough, but not too big. And the size is like, it's just the right size. It's approachable. And of course, Scranton itself, the government, the school district, they're not perfect. They have problems, just like every other government. So the idea that money would help the situation, you can't deny. You can't say that if a data center comes in and they're willing to commit a very large amount of money towards the city, that itself, when you isolate it, would not be a good thing for the city.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the cost when you amortize the increase in electric costs totaled among all residents among 10 years? The 10 years. What is the total cost over time when you amortize the depreciation in the real estate values nearby? You can't argue with the idea that residential property values are not going to be as high if a data center is in the backyard.
Right.
There's a gradient to that, maybe if you're 5 miles away versus it being in your literal backyard, it might be a huge difference. That might be 100% of the difference. I don't know what that radius is. That probably depends a lot on the area and everything, but
it's a good thing to say the closer you are, the less your home is going to be valued, or your property.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
And that's also very classic. Look at New York City with the developments of these high rises that were technically impossible. So like if you look at a lot of Park Avenue in New York, there's a lot of air rights in play that were exchanged and lobbied and bartered. And the air rights thing in New York City is very complex on how you can stack buildings and levels. And like, I think it's 438 Park Avenue. They're very, very, it's like the tallest one. It's very, very skinny, and it sways in the wind. They have like terrifying lawsuits and stuff with the building. So one of the ways in which they convinced, I think, the New York City Housing or Zoning Authority to approve the project was that they would build all this low income housing.
Okay.
And the low income housing is like right on the opposite catty corner behind. It's not very far away. It's within like 0.2 miles, very close, like a block or two. And it's extremely, would I say, both developments extremely underwhelming, under-delivered.
Right.
Many people complain on both sides of the spectrum. You've got people who live in the low-income housing that have problems, and you've got people who live in the most expensive apartments in New York City in that building and have problems. The residents of the building sued the developers of the building. Why I bring this up is because a lot of times you see this where in order to change the standards of acceptable use for property, the developer will convince the authority that, oh, hey, if we do something really good next door, like, that's our donation to you. That's why you should accept it. So, like the crazy one video that you posted where it's like a little league field or whatever next to the data center.
Soccer, like baseball.
That is classic.
And there's nobody there.
That's classic. So like that's the type of stuff that you could probably expect. You could probably expect if the people that are currently running Scranton are going to fight for Scranton. If they fight for Scranton, but they still lose the fight against the data center developers per se, or they compromise, that's what you'll see. You'll see a lot of these subsidies that come in the form of like development playgrounds or just total guaranteed money to the government. And the big question to me, which I think is where I was going with all this, is that not everybody wants that. Some people are here because we don't need to go crazy and expand everything, and we don't need like another $100 million in the budget, because if we have $100 more million in the budget, we might waste $100 more million. Like, it doesn't always make sense to throw gas on the fire.
Well, that was one of the things that I was really curious about, because like North Pocono, for example,
right?
And I don't remember whether it was 63 million, 68 million, whatever they were getting.
That's what I was thinking of in my mind talking about this.
So, what happens in 10 years, just like the solar farms, when they just up and leave.
Yes.
And now they have this massive budget deficit.
Yes.
That they
exactly.
And 10 years from now, it's all new elected officials.
These aren't royalties. These aren't like payment agreements based on revenue. These are one-time payments. And that's the point. That's the thing that's so important, is like if a company is willing to give you $60 million, $40 million, think about what it's worth to them. And look at what their balance sheet is. Most publicly traded companies, you can look it up. You can determine what their earnings are, and then their price and their price to earnings ratio. And that's like the premium that people are willing to pay for the company. So like, for example, I'll give a random example. Lamar, who's like a billboard company that everybody knows about. They're publicly traded. If they're doing $1 million a year in revenue, but then the value of all of their the price of all of their stock combined is $8 million, then that means that people are willing to pay like an 8-to-1 price to earnings ratio for the ability to have future ownership of future earnings in the company.
Okay.
So like why that's so important is if it's 8-to-1, that means Lamar can invest in things. Anything less than 7-year payoff, 8-year payoff, it's good. Because they have an infinite stream of public capital of people that are willing to buy the stock at 8x multiple. So they have cash on hand to develop up to 8 years into the future for future returns. So look at the price to earnings ratios of these tech companies. They are astronomical. Some of them are above 50, some of them are above 100
to 1.
Yes. So the amount of cash on hand relative to the earnings and the future earnings power, when you hear the $60 million or the $40 million, whatever you said, that is nothing to these companies. Like, they don't understand. And that's a one-time payment, which is exactly that's the problem. You take $40 million, that's like taking ARPA money, which has a lot of problems. Yes, there were good things that came from the ARPA money. There were people that lucked out. There were good causes that received things that they need, resources that they need. There was also a lot of waste and abuse. I would hope most people would agree with that.
Nationwide.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't distribute money without risk, and there's always going to be waste in the distribution of money. I once read something which is great. Money never exchanges between parties without a leak in the bucket.
Okay.
And that exists both from an economic and financial modeling perspective in the business of moving money. So like banking's not free. The movement of money is not free. We all pay to transact money. You pay money in Venmo, you pay money to use your credit card. The movement of the money is like 2 to 5% of all the money. The cost of moving all the money. So the money does not transfer without a leak in the bucket. And the same thing goes with like the distribution of grant money and free money. It's never free, and there's always a leak in the bucket. And that sometimes that leak is like fraud. Sometimes it's waste. Sometimes it's abuse. Sometimes it's just human error. Or like the business didn't work out and you gave a grant to something and it maybe was not the best idea.
You're the best. You're the best. So what is, have we reached artificial general intelligence yet or no?
I think we were about to go right down that rabbit hole, which is just people always ask me about it. They say, what is it? What does it mean? And I say, this is what, that was it. That was how we got into the monopoly conversation.
Yes.
So that's the word that
I knew we'd come back.
That's the new word. So the same way that Google was an advertising company. Mm-hmm. What is artificial general intelligence? What is advertising? Advertising is huge and it's infinite. You can't really, there's going to be companies that put a number on it. It's basically infinite though. Like if you look at the advertising industry as a whole, it's very difficult to get like multiple consulting firms to agree that it's the same number per year.
Right.
You know, it's always going to be some variance. So it's very interesting because like the AGI term is this idea that people have in their minds that, oh my goodness, the computers are going to be smarter than us someday and they're going to be bossing us around and they're not going to shut off and they're going to take our resources from us and, you know, this crazy
Skynet,
this crazy idea.
Terminator.
I unfortunately would like to say, I think it's already here. That's the point of the word. The word is so vague and hard to put a particular binary definition to, which is part of the design of the bigness of the word. But if you break it down, artificial general intelligence like ChatGPT is like, if you look at the benchmarks, they score all of these models that take tests. They take the bar exam, they take the MedCat, they take the SATs, they take tests. And they also have tests that are specifically designed for AI systems. There's no human. I mean, maybe there's one guy. I haven't met him yet. There's not a lot of humans that are an expert in law, an expert in medicine, an expert in poetry, an expert in finance, an expert in technology, like a general expert in pretty much everything. Yeah, they're not like 100% in anything, but they're like 98 to 99% in most things. That's like an exceptional human being. No human being is really like that.
So your argument is that because this one entity can do those things, that the AGI is already here, which makes sense.
Not one entity, multiple entities. I think all the
we use ChatGPT as the example.
But all the state of the art AIs right now, Gemini, Grok, Claude, ChatGPT, which is OpenAI's product, they are all state of the art, all in this arms race. All of their systems, the whole like passing of the MCAT, the medical exams, they've been passing that for like a year and a half or 2 years already. All the models. That's like long behind.
Yeah, that's kindergarten for them.
And that's why I say the artificially general intelligence, that's already here. They're already generally intelligent, much more generally intelligent than we are as humans.
And they're artificial.
If you don't understand that, you don't understand the real implications or how people are using it, because most people are using it like for generally everything. So
you're right. The word, like if you literally just use the word artificial general intelligence, it's all there.
Yeah. But people, like when I try to talk to people about it, they have this idea that it's going to be like killer robots and like this whole crazy thing.
Drone swarms.
The whole thing is like, there's not one meeting, there's not one guy, there's not one robot. There might be a robot at some point. Right now, it's not in the form of a robot. The movie Her was really interesting to me because
I never watched that, but I know.
It was a bit strange.
Yeah, Spike Jonze.
Didn't really understand it first time I watched it. Thought it was a little bit out there. If you rewatch it now, it's strangely accurate. To like where we are and where we're going. And I think it's a peek into where we're going to be more like 5-10 years from now, where things get a lot stranger in terms of the human computer interaction, where like people develop more emotions and connections with the systems, which is definitely interesting because obviously like if you have an AI that makes somebody feel better, and it's like acting like somebody's therapist, a sounding board. That's probably generally good, but that's coming at the cost of that person not interacting with a human, which could be bad. And also, like if that develops into anything, like the idea of right? Yeah, and like that. Her is a very strange movie because it's all about like humans falling in love with the machine, and it's a bit strange. But it's probably very accurate in terms of like where we're going with this. Even like their concepts of how we would be talking to these things in voice mode and stuff. It's pretty much where we are now. The interface is going to change a little bit. I think the phone will always exist, but the form and the package and the medium might change a little bit to be more optimal to collect more information for the AI systems, to augment the human more. Like that's going to be a big component, is that the AI
augmented humans,
augmenting all of the manual things that humans do, including memory, which is strange, but like just interpreting information and storing it. Yeah. You see a lot of these AI startups and companies that are trying to develop hardware around the collection of information. You wear like a necklace and then it basically just records everything. And then you can use AI, like it automatically determines like what you need to do and how busy you are and what you're getting done and all this stuff. Once again, they're optimizing for input tokens. So like it's going to be a race to the bottom with that. You're going to see more and more companies that have hardware that are trying to get you to use it to basically collect everything and then ingest it into AI. So, yeah, I mean, it's strange. It's a strange time.
Can I ask you a final question? Because I'm trying to keep these at 2 hours anymore.
Yeah.
So it seems like the inverse of all of this or maybe like the contrast of it. Like the way to be would be, as reductive as it sounds, to like touch grass, to like be one with like nature, have conversations with your friends and your family, go for a walk in the woods. Do you think that like more people should make a better attempt to be human as opposed to like being what we're basically being turned into is like these weird automatons whose algorithms tell us what to think and feel and what anxieties we should have and not. I mean, like, I love the puppy videos too and they make me laugh, but like there's a lot of dark shit there too.
In the weirdest way, just like corduroy pants are popular and then they're not and then they're popular again.
Okay. Yeah.
The new trend, I believe, in the next, I think now even it's becoming a thing, but next couple of years you'll see more and more of it. Going offline will be like a very big luxury, which is very strange.
Yes.
Because it was really like, 20 years ago, a whole movement to get the whole world online.
And now the response to that is like, we can't, like, we need to not be that.
So I think that's like a very interesting oscillation that goes back and forth.
I don't know if, I mean, that's kind of like been the whole thing I've been trying to struggle with over the last few years is like I need technology to talk to you and get it out to the world. But the thing that sucks is like, I find the conversations that we have without this stuff awesome. And no one else can share in it. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, the whole like everything out there all the time thing, that's challenging, like I have a financial incentive, you have a financial incentive to use the internet for business reasons, which weighs like a deep personal cost because you can never really get away from it to a degree.
Yeah. Unless you totally... You're
right.
out.
And that means like you're not working to a degree.
Well, then you're growing potatoes in the...
Yeah, but even like a vacation.
Yeah.
If you turn your phone off, I mean, imagine having a bunch of projects going on and you just turn your phone off. Like you'd have to plan for that. That'd be like a big thing.
Yeah.
So it's amazing the burden that we have. We have so many problems, and the problems stem from abundance and having too many things, which is very strange. We're so funny humans. We want everything and then we get everything, and we prove over and over again why we shouldn't have everything. And this is another classic oscillation that, like, you look at civilization, you really zoom out, if you look at civilizations as a whole, most of it is the same stuff over and over again. You just change like the technology and the character names, and it's like the same stuff over and over again.
It's happened before, it'll happen again.
Yeah. So like the times change and the paradigm shifts, but the technology is really just like bundling and unbundling that.
Did you have fun doing this?
Good time. Thanks for having me.
Can we do it again?
Yeah, absolutely.
What can we talk about next time? Or maybe let's let the universe tell us.
It's concerning the number of things we could talk about.
It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
Do you have hope for us? Do you have hope for the...
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, I think you have to be an optimist. I think it can be really hard sometimes, but we've only made it this far through the darkest times ever because people have pushed through. And like all we really can do in our own things, no matter what level we're at and no matter what we're doing, is we can exist within systems that have well-aligned incentives and not feed into systems that have bad, poorly designed incentives, because the poor incentives like come at the cost of someone else.
We have to figure out a way for people to understand the incentives. I don't think we were trained to look at things that way.
Yeah, because the system is like, I don't know. I have a very strange life because I don't, I do like my own thing. You do too. So it's like kind of like eat what you kill.
Yeah.
In terms of like the business and the money that you make. And so like you become programmed to a degree when you're making a regular salary and you're living within somebody else's system.
Mm-hmm.
And you become content to a degree with things, and you start becoming like just hardened. Like the brain likes the well-trodden paths, the neural pathways in your brain. Like the brain likes to do the same things over and over again. It feels good. It's easier. It's lower energy.
Yep.
The system is optimized to not use energy. It requires energy to even use energy.
Yep.
So like these are all factors, I think, that contribute to it. But
Bailey Simrell, one of the best humans I've ever met in my life.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Are we gonna keep fighting?
Yeah, gotta fight.
Oh wait, one more thing. Where do people find like your shit? Do you want to talk about some of the things that you built? Or
yeah, I mean, I run a business, but that's not really as fun. Some of the stuff I do that's exciting now is more around like just government and trying to use technology to make people's lives better. Probably the project I would send people to right now is lackawancaconnect.com. That's a new project I'm working on, which is has a lot of cool stuff in the pipes, but really with the goal of combining all things Lackawanna County from an information perspective and making it easier for people to find things. So,
and it'll be a great resource for everybody once they get on it.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good. A lot of things coming too. So
you're a good man, my friend.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
See y'all.